Hi, I'm Neal Gittleman, Artistic Director and Conductor of your Dayton Philharmonic Orchestra, and I am here with some of the musicians who have participated in the Strings, Woodwinds, and Piano Salon Chamber Music Stream, and also the Concertmaster's Choice Chamber Music Stream, and we're just gonna have a little chat session about the performances that they've recorded for you all. Welcome to our Dayton Philharmonic musicians. It's great to see all of you. I look forward to when I can see you in 3 dimensions instead of just two, but two is better than none. How about we go around the screen and everyone can maybe introduce themselves and remind people which pieces you played on. We'll go sort of around the horn.
Sure. John Krikawa, principal clarinet, and I played in the Beethoven Septet and the chamber arrangement of Till Eulenspiegel.
And Kirsten?
Hi, principal second violin. I played in the Brahms piano quintet.
And Jonathan, you're next.
I am Jonathan, principal cello, and I played in the Beethoven Septet, the Dochnani Serenade, and the Brahms piano quintet.
We have John, Jonathan, and John here. So John P., you're next.
Yes, I'm the assistant principal bass, and I played in the Beethoven and the Strauss Till Eulenspiegel.
And Sheridan?
Hi, I'm principal viola, and I played in the Beethoven Septet, the Dochnani Serenade, and the Brahms piano quintet.
And we've gone around in a circle, and now we come to Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica, Concertmaster, and I played in everything. Everything needed a violin, so at least one violin.
And on my screen, the way you're arranged, the whole world revolves around Rachel. So Rachel, you are
It
up.
happened once. Yeah, so my name is Rachel Young, principal bassoon, and I played on the Strauss Eulenspiegel chamber arrangement as well as the Beethoven Septet.
Jess has joined us. Hey, Jess.
Hi all, sorry I'm late.
That's okay.
Hi everyone, my name's Jess Pinkham. I play second horn with the Dayton Philharmonic, and I played on the Beethoven Septet and Till Eulenspiegel Einmalanders.
But there's something really surreal when you rehearse 6, 8, 10 feet apart, however we were from the various other players in the group for the first time. And you just take for granted how much easier it is to quickly react musically, tempo-wise to the players around you when even just a few more feet of space is closed between you. And so that was one of my biggest anxieties about putting it together under the social distancing requirements that obviously are important, just because I was worried it would be harder to get that cohesion. And I feel like we quickly adapted throughout the rehearsal process, and it really sounded unified, especially as rhythmically tricky as it is. So that's been an interesting challenge to overcome, but I feel like it worked out, and I hope everyone really felt the same way.
I would agree with that. I think the interesting thing about the repertoire was I got to be Kirsten, because in each of these, in the two pieces I played, the Strauss and the Beethoven, the clarinet was essentially the second violin. And I sat where probably Kirsten would sit. And it was not, I would agree that not only the 6 to 8 to 10 feet distancing was difficult, but I didn't get to sit close to Rachel or Jess. And those would usually be the people that I would kind of glom onto because they're kind of the rock. But instead I had John Pasqualini, and I think that's really fun, because I think playing chamber music with the bass is so fun, because it sets such a solid base for the group. But for me it would have been a different experience in any case, but I think especially because of the repertoire, it was definitely different. I got to experience what it would have been like to be second violin, which was both really fun and kind of terrifying at the same time.
One question I have, when you played the Beethoven Septet, you were in a very unusual formation of sitting in a circle. So what was that like? Because that's completely different from any of the normal setups that we use in the orchestra or in chamber music.
I could speak to that. For me, it was more of necessity. Normally we would be in sort of a little U shape, but close enough to where, people are within the corner of your eye, sort of your peripheral vision. In this case, the way we were spread out, where I was seated, I could look at Jessica, but I'd be turning my back to Jonathan and John, and vice versa. So depending on who I had to be with, I felt like I had to sort of completely turn myself, and it was really disconcerting because sometimes you want connection with sides, and I felt like I wasn't able to get that until we sort of rounded our U shape into more of a circular kind of angle. And we also did think it would be kind of interesting, just from the viewer's perspective too, to have it, without an audience to play and direct our sound toward. It seemed like it was a way to sort of round out and draw the viewer in a little bit.
John Kurokawa mentioned playing with the bass in chamber orchestra and the chamber music. We don't have a lot of stuff pre-20th century in with the bass. We have the Beethoven Septet, we have the Dvorak Quintet, and that's about it. So it was fun for me to play chamber music and especially to play something like Beethoven, which is very standard rep. Most of the bass stuff with chamber music is 20th century, and it's a little bit different than playing Beethoven.
Don't forget one of my favorite pieces, which is the Trout Quintet. You have that too.
That's true. That's true.
That's one of the great ones. Speaking of the Till Eulenspiegel chamber arrangement, I imagine all of you have played the orchestral version of Till Eulenspiegel at some time in your life. And like any Strauss piece, it's a wonderful piece of music, and it's got lots and lots and lots of notes. So what's it like when a piece that was intended to be played by 75 or 80 or maybe even 90 or 100 players all sharing in the millions of notes? What's it like when that gets distilled down to a tiny group of players? Do you ever get to rest? How do you compare the experience of playing those two pieces?
Well, one thing that was kind of different for me was the role the bassoon is used in that arrangement. Normally in the full orchestra, we're not as responsible for as many technical passages or quite as virtuosic material. Usually that's the strings or the flute and the clarinet. And with only 5 players, everyone had to do that heavy lifting. And so I found it particularly daunting in that way. The bassoon's not the most agile instrument of the group, but it was also a fun challenge to get to kind of step up and take on that role in a way that I don't typically in a full orchestra setting.
That I'm always keeping in mind for his orchestral work, that I'm playing in probably a really massive orchestra with at least 5 or 6 horns on stage, so it's a pretty intense, I don't want to say aggressive, but there has to be some aggression with it when you're playing. And I realized when I was getting ready for this arrangement that I only had to play with 5 players. And on top of that, I'm definitely the loudest voice in the ensemble. So I had to really rethink the way I approached Strauss and think of it being a lot more delicate in a way, so that I wouldn't just sort of blast through the entire group.
One of the things that makes that arrangement so great is that if you didn't know the full orchestral version, you almost wouldn't know, because it's so, there are some of the tunes are missing, but it sounds so complete and so full. I'm probably gonna get smacked around for saying this, but one of the things I actually kind of missed was the conductor, because in the opening, when the horn, and Jess played the horn solo so beautifully, but when you actually have to, but it's so syncopated, and when you have to put notes on the beats, the one thing I do is I keep an eye on the conductor and I look for boom, and when he goes boom, I go ta, and I and having to do it without having to play without it, we were totally on our own, and that involved a lot of listening and score study. Much more so because, well, you couldn't blame it on the guy with the stick, because the guy with the stick was us. So that also I think was very, 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 very different. And the other thing too is there were a lot of passages in my part from the original version, but they were changed just enough to make it make it really hard. But it was so much fun. It was so much fun to put together. I was really pleased with how quickly it came together. And how hard everybody worked to make it happen.
Speaking to John's point about John Kurokawa's point about how the arrangement that we played of Till Eulenspiegel is just a little bit different from the original. One spot that any horn players listening or people who are familiar with the piece will notice is that the horn solo in the beginning of the piece is different from the original, and that's one that most of us start learning when we're in high school or at early college at the latest. And so to have to relearn that solo just a little bit was a challenge. But yeah, he sneaks just a couple little differences in there that can sneak up on you if you're not ready.
Should we maybe talk about the Brahms piano quintet?
I do sometimes miss playing first violin. I miss the melodic stuff, but I love playing second, and I hope, John, you enjoyed playing your second violin a little bit too. One of the things I really love about it is that you're in the middle. You're in the middle of everything, so it's in a way easier to hear. It's easier to be with people on the high treble and the low bass, and I love that. But Jessica, what you were saying about the music being different, that was reminding me, and especially Brahms. Sometimes in this piece, the Brahms quintet, but also in the symphonies, there was, when I was in high school, I listened to a lot of Brahms before I ever saw the music. And because of the way he displaces bars and beats, there are a couple of symphonies that when I first started to learn them, I had a really tough time, because from listening them for years and not seeing the music, I assumed the beats were in places that they weren't. And so what Jessica was saying, if you're learning something some way, in my case, I was learning it incorrectly by ear, but it's hard to change. But the second violin, I just love playing it. But something different that was about the quintet that was different is that often the first and second violins are in unison. That doesn't often happen in Brahms, even in the quartets or the string quintets. That never happens. The piano quintet is actually the only piece I know where Jessica and I were playing the exact same thing in the exact same octave. So that was a different thing. I mean, it made it seem more orchestral to me as a result.
It's too bad we don't have Aurelian to comment on the Brahms.
Well, I think Aurelian is fine with playing Brahms and the next thing that's coming up that Jessica was talking about.
And my stand partner has a penchant for hating Brahms, in fact, but he said he's willing to play anything at this point because of the pandemic. Should we talk about the string trio?
So one of the pieces that was on the repertoire for these streams was the string trio by the composer Dochnani, who is a wonderful composer, but who has a very difficult to pronounce name. Anybody want to have any comments about playing that piece?
Well, I really enjoyed playing it. It's a really fantastic, challenging work, and gives a lot of sort of meaty parts to the viola. Somewhere along the line in our rehearsing and recording, I was sending a text message about it, but trying to use my voice to text. And if you try this, Siri will try to type it out as Duck Nanny. So if you're ever wondering how to pronounce Duck Nanny, if you think Duck Nanny, you'll be pretty close.
I'm wondering, is a duck nanny a nanny that you get to take care of your duck, or is it a duck who you get to be the nanny for your kids? Or can it be either?
Definitely the second one.
Definitely. Sounds like fun.
Yeah, that piece was especially fun to play, and it's not very long either. I think just 22 to 25 minutes, and 5 movements. They're all relatively short, and so I mean, we had a lot of time to really dig into what do we want each movement to sound like. What little details do we want to bring out that in larger works like the Beethoven, we didn't have quite as much time just because we had to budget our time a little bit more carefully because the piece was so long we had to get through it. But with such a short piece, I mean, every movement is just so dense and so unique, and so it was really fun to have the opportunity to converse and figure out exactly what did we want this piece, like what colors and what characters do we want to bring out.
One question that I have about the various chamber music pieces that you all played, and of course you didn't all play all of them, but so you have the Dochnani Trio, which is only 3 players. You have the Brahms Quintet and the redo of Till Eulenspiegel, which are 5 players, and you have the Beethoven Septet, which has 7. Can you explain maybe to the audience how different it is, for instance, when you're just one of 3 players and all the musical texture comes from those 3 players versus, say, in the Beethoven, where there's 7 people involved? It's obviously going to be different, but I think it might be interesting for people to hear when you're on the inside playing one of those pieces, the challenges of playing a trio versus a quartet or a quintet or a septet.
I certainly had much more to do in the trio than I did in the septet or the quintet. It's condensed down into probably much more work per person, more notes.
Yeah, I would also say, having played on all 4 pieces, it definitely is, the differences become kind of exponential. So I did have a lot of notes in every single piece, but the feeling is very different. It's much more nimble when you're just playing with 3 people, and then even with the spacing, 6 feet apart for string players with masks and everything, it still felt fairly intimate, I guess, with the way we were able to respond. Whereas once you get up to a septet, then it's just a larger scale, to where if I'm cueing something, like, my gestures have to be more exaggerated.
I'd also like to add that for a larger group like the septet, you in a way have to know the score and know how the piece fits together even better, because you have to be flexible enough to know when to step out for a measure or two, and know when to blend back in the texture, and know which are the more important lines versus the less important lines, and how that changes constantly. Once you get down to a smaller group, the composer is, every note counts, and yes, someone has the melody and someone might be accompanying, but it's far less nuanced. And so yeah, there's the added challenge of, even with a chamber ensemble like that, knowing what your role is every measure, even halfway through a measure, something trades off, and being able to blend and adapt accordingly.
For me, a lot of the chamber music, I'm used to playing like quartets and whatnot. The cello is really the bass voice of the ensemble, and so playing with piano and then playing in the septet, having John on the bass and sometimes Rachel and I would double as well. That having the bass grounded a lot more kind of enables the cello to take on a little bit of a different role in that kind of piece. So in the Dochnani, I would have to play the bass a lot, and then kind of transition, and the viola would fill the role when he gives the cello a nice melody. But in the Beethoven, there were a lot of really great melodies that he gives the cello that I don't have to worry about holding down the bass line, because there's another instrument or 2 to do that as well. And that's one of the things I enjoy about playing chamber music with bass. And I've recently done the Dvorak, and that's another instance of the cello being able to take on a different role.
Jessica mentioned about cueing in the piece, which of course is, in an orchestral context, that's usually the conductor's job. But perhaps could you maybe talk about, for people who are viewers who aren't quite as aware of what happens in chamber music, can you all talk a little bit about how the communication works among the members of an ensemble, and how you cue each other and how you relate to each other?
You know, when we play an orchestra, even though, you know, we're all watching Neal, we still move quite a bit. And, you know, I think sometimes, you know, I'll ask us, because I sit next to Rachel. She's like my wing woman. You know, I'll ask her a favor and just say, hey, can we check each other here? And we'll, you know, move on an entrance. For me, like cueing the beginning of a movement and just getting the exact tempo right sometimes actually is almost more challenging than just playing. It's something that I actually incorporate into my practice. You know, if you practice with a metronome, sure, but practice actually, you know, giving cues. And I think it goes back again to what Rachel and Jonathan were saying. It's just knowing the score and knowing what everybody else has to do to make it work. But that's one of the things I love about doing chamber music is I don't normally in the orchestra, I don't get to exchange musical ideas with Jonathan or John, or, you know, and I think that's just wonderful. So that's how I come at it.
Since Neal asked a little bit about how it works without the conductor, you know, obviously we have to give some sort of indication or sign of starting, and usually it's up to the highest kind of soprano voice, which often ends up being the violin, but it's sometimes the clarinet in the Beethoven a lot of the time. You know, we basically just give an upbeat, which I usually do by both breath and then, you know, physically lifting the instrument and lifting the bow, and then coming down on the downbeat, hopefully together with everyone else if I've been clear enough about it. Similar to what we were talking about before, the gestures just have to be more exaggerated the more people there are, you know, spread further out. So,
yeah, and I think that the Strauss is a really good example of this, because throughout the piece, almost everybody has to lead at some point. I mean, there's a point about somewhere in the early middle where Rachel and I have this little papa, papa, papa thing going on, and I led that just because it was easier. And when you play a string instrument, you can, as Jessica said, you can sniff, use your breath, you can use your head, and sometimes you can use your bow, much like a conductor would conduct, and you show when you're going to play. And then there was another time later on in the Strauss where John had to lead, so where we all had to play at the same time. So yeah, if during the Strauss, it'll be interesting to watch, to see everybody leading in a different, in their own individual way.
That is one of the things I enjoy so much about chamber music, is just everybody has that much more a sense of ownership and responsibility for knowing when to lead, knowing, you know, when to support. And then, you know, there's, yeah, as far as you know, cueing and whatnot, there's so much body language and eye contact, and the mask really makes some of that difficult because we only have that much to work with. But, you know, as far as moving, I think like what John was saying, I know I move a lot when I play it, but I think everything that we do, you know, has some bearing on what kind of sound we want to create and how we're approaching the music. And when we're all, like, especially in the Beethoven, when we're sitting in a circle and we can all see everybody, you know, that just kind of builds and compounds, and then, you know, you can have that much more fun, you know, just being able to play off of the energy that everybody else in the group is bringing to the performance.
Regardless of instrument, the breath is such an important tool for cueing. And you can, with a chamber group that's really like tuned in with one another, you can see them all breathe together, all move together. It's a really, really cool experience.
My conducting teacher at the Monteau School was very big on the whole notion of breathing by the conductor, and he would sometimes to show you how important it is. He would sometimes have, especially if a conductor was having trouble getting a piece started, he would ask the conductor to put their hands in their pockets and lead it just with the rest of their body, but especially with their breath. And it was a good way to learn how important the actual fact of breathing is when you are giving a cue.
I just enjoyed playing music again because we haven't played anything since March. So it was great seeing everybody. It was great playing music, and Beethoven Strauss are wonderful to play. So I had a really good time, and it was nice to play again, and it was nice to have something to do. So I had to practice.
As great as it was to get to work together again and to get to put this music out there so our audience can enjoy it, I have never missed what it means to have an audience more than trying to do this for the cameras in an empty room and try to capture the excitement. And so I know our audience is watching, so hi audience, like please, we can't wait to see you again. And that energy that you bring to us and help us translate to you is impossible to recreate. And it made me miss it more than ever, even though I'm glad we had this opportunity.
I'm just really grateful for the creativity that we've had in our programming during this crisis. We're trying to adapt to this new world as best we can, and to be able to put out great music like Strauss and Beethoven and Dovnany and share that with the public in a new way is really exciting. And just for me as a horn player, I mean, any opportunity to play Till Eulenspiegel, it's such a classic for us in our repertoire. So that was, I have to say that was probably my favorite piece that I played. But especially just be working with these great musicians again and making beautiful music. It was really a blessing.
Strauss was also my favorite piece, actually, so I'll agree with Jess. I mean, obviously everything really is a masterpiece, so it's difficult to choose, but I think it was probably just the fact that, that the Strauss or the Hasenauer arrangement of it is, originally orchestral, and so that just reminds me, obviously so much of getting to play with everybody. I also noticed the first time we rehearsed that the spacing, especially with the strings in the Brahms quintet, was almost like the spacing would be in orchestra. So it was about as far away from Kirsten as I would be if Aurelian was in between us, and so that was familiar in some way, but of course it took a little getting used to as far as just the gaps between people. So I'm really hoping that with our continued virtual programming with autumn streams and holiday streams, that we'll be able to feature more of our great musicians, and that's really what it's all about. I mean, kind of ironically, at this time we're doing a lot more chamber music because that is what is safer and healthier to be doing in smaller groups of people. But we really are kind of, we're really at our best, of course, in our full forces. So, and we hope to bring that to you whenever it's safe to do so.
I would say for me, Jessica's already heard me say this like 3 million times, but when she asked me if I would be interested in playing the Beethoven Septet, I almost did a backflip, except I would have thrown my back out. I've been waiting over 30 years to play that piece, and to get to play it, especially with this group and, with some of my dearest friends, was just sent me over the moon. But it also made me realize how much I miss playing a real Beethoven symphony in our full forces. So I can't wait until we can do that for our audiences again, and can't wait for us to be able to bring that music to you.
The Beethoven is what I'm actually looking forward to the most in our upcoming. I only played on the one piece on the Brahms Quintet for this grouping, but it's a piece I've loved for over 30 years. Was so happy to play it again, and really looking forward to Beethoven coming up.
I'm just so glad to have been able to play chamber music again, or just music in general, with with everybody here. It was just such a breath of fresh air, and after being without it for so long, you know, you kind of forget what it's like to be in the same room as other people and having this unique experience. And I think the Beethoven especially was really, really meaningful to me, just being surrounded by this music of warmth and joy and comfort, which seems like things that you know, are harder to find these days. And so that was really amazing to just live with that for such a long time, and then to perform with everybody. And I think, you know, it's another reminder for me of just, you know, what music can do for us, and how it is that glimmer of hope that we all need. And so I look forward to, as everyone has said, I look forward to the time where we can all be back together and playing in person for our live audience. And but in the meantime, I mean, we have more lined up to bring to everybody. And so I'm looking forward to all those things that we can do in the meantime.
I found myself a few times sort of overcome with gratitude when I was playing with all of you, my colleagues. I just feel so blessed to have such incredible people to play with. And I especially liked the Beethoven because of the mixed wind and string combination. It's something we don't, I mean, chamber music wise, it's a little less common. Usually you have, you know, the woodwind quintet or the string quartet. It's nice to combine forces and have the contrasts. And so it's just really wonderful to play in a group like that, in a smaller group. Of course, I do miss orchestra terribly, but this was definitely something that I think I needed in the deepest part of my soul. So definitely, I'd love to do some more of this mixed chamber music. Now that we've done the Beethoven Septet, perhaps next we could do the PDQ Bach Schleptet or something like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.